Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
The Oregon legislature's 160-day session begins today, and our state lawmakers are tackling some of the most pressing issues for Portlanders, including fixes for our mental and behavioral health care systems and our ongoing public defender shortage. This session also marks a leadership change in the House of Representatives, with Democratic Representative Julie Fahey stepping in as the new Speaker of the House. So today on CityCast Portland, Oregon House Speaker Julie Fahey joins us for a short preview of what's to come this legislative session. It's Tuesday, January 21st. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. So, in Governor Kotek's State of State speech, she outlined 3 major priorities for this legislative session, which are housing, homelessness, and education. But then in like a classic boss move, she also was like, oh, and also equally as important, but don't keep your, eyes away from this one. And that would be finding funding for transportation, wildfires, and more solutions to the public defender crisis. But I'm sure there are even more issues other lawmakers are hoping to bring up this session, including yourself. So I'm curious what you're most eager to tackle.
So I am the House Speaker. And so traditionally, the House Speaker doesn't work as much on personal priorities or individual bills. My job is a little bit more the higher level. What are the big priorities that we need to get done for the state of Oregon? What are the big things that Oregonians want us to be working on? And so I agree with all of those things that the governor said around housing and homelessness and public defense and transportation and education. And I start the conversation about how are we going to do this work in Salem this year from knowing that one of the things that is most top of minds for Oregonians right now is cost of living and affordability. So for me, when I talk about the session and the work that I hope to get done, that is the place where we need to start. And, we know that there's a lot of things at the state level that we cannot control around cost of living, but there's some big ticket things around housing and healthcare and utilities and childcare that we can and should make a difference on.
Cost of living and affordability, I know, is top of mind for many people. So there's a ton of issues that the legislature is planning to address around housing, as you mentioned, whether we're talking about the governor's push to build more houses or ways to create new solutions for unhoused people. But we actually wanted to zero in on something that's been a big issue for Portland in particular, and I haven't seen mentioned yet. What's on the agenda to fix our behavioral health care system? Because Oregon is still considered to be among the lowest ranked states in the country when it comes to access to mental and behavioral health resources. And in Portland, we're seeing this very clearly on our streets. Do you know if anything's coming this way?
Yeah.
Are you able to brief us just a little bit?
Yeah, so we, as you mentioned, in Oregon, we have had challenges with access to behavioral health care. And that's primarily due to both workforce shortages and a lack of different kinds of facilities at different levels to meet the needs. And so over the last few years, I think starting in 2021, in the legislature at the state level, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in shovel-ready projects to build new facilities, in mobile crisis response, and importantly, in workforce. You can build the beds, but obviously you need workers that are trained and ready to staff them. So, if you put aside money 3 or 4 years ago to build facilities, they're just now starting to come online. I'm from Lane County. I'm not a Portlander. Thanks for having me on, even though I don't live in Portland. So we're starting to see in our community some of those beds come online and some of those investments come online. It's been really great to see. And we have to keep up the momentum. We know we're not there yet. We've made good progress, but there's still a lot more to do. And so I think this session on behavioral health will be a little bit more focused on kind of keeping up that momentum, looking at where we've been able to make progress in, certain types of secure residential facilities, and maybe we need more progress in a different type of facility or a different type of workforce.
Yeah, I guess what I was going to ask was if you've heard of any specific ideas, but it seems like it's just starting to kind of coalesce.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that might be interesting to listeners to flag. We know that one challenge we face is how difficult it is to site residential treatment facilities in local communities, especially when we're talking about community-based treatment. There are local appeals that can happen that, can keep facilities from ever being built or can delay the construction of those facilities. We've had some discussions in the legislature in the past about how to expedite that siting so that these facilities can get built faster.
Mm-hmm.
I also think we'll have a conversation this session about our civil commitment laws. So civil commitment is, if someone is a danger to themselves or others, they can be civilly committed to a behavioral health facility. That process can be difficult. Sometimes some people find it challenging to access. And so there's been a lot of work over the last couple of years to come up with, are there ways that we can improve that civil commitment process? You can't do that in isolation. That's not, if you fix that, it's not fixing the whole problem. You have to keep building more facilities and expanding capacity. But it is a really important piece that we'll be tackling this session too.
I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of bills come up because that's something that has been brought up on the show before. But I just wanted to ask, just a follow-up, when you stated the site issues about where they go, these centers, does that mean taking away community input on where they go? I'm just curious what that entails.
The goal is to make it easier and faster to site these treatment facilities so that and we're specifically talking about residential treatment facilities. So these are smaller facilities, usually 16 beds or less, where folks can get treatment in their communities. They don't need hospital-level care, but they need a place to go and get treatment. And so the proposals that we've had in the past have been around trying to make it easier or faster to site those facilities and, wanting to preserve that balance of community input, but maybe, nudging a little bit more towards it can't take 5 years to get a new facility built.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, Governor Kotek also asked for action on the shortage of public defenders, which has been a problem in Oregon for years. And I know the legislature passed a bill to put $96 million towards addressing this issue back in 2023, but it's still a big problem that we're feeling here in Portland. Is there any legislation you're hoping passes in this session that could address the issue?
So it's a critically important issue, and people have a constitutional right to a competent defense. What we've seen in recent years is not necessarily across the state, but in specific counties in the state, a large number of unrepresented defendants. So the 6 counties where this is really an issue are Multnomah, Washington, Marion, Coos, Douglas, and Jackson. And so this is an area where the legislature has put substantial focus over the last few years. That is both resources, as you mentioned, but importantly, it's also restructuring how we deliver public defense in this state. We just transferred the Public Defense Division to the executive branch, so created a new state agency to oversee it. And I think that will bring with it more accountability and more resources for this work. We've done some targeted things over the years, including enhanced payments for public defenders to keep them in the workforce. And I know that our budget subcommittees are going to keep digging into this and keep holding the agency accountable. And we're looking to see how well some of the changes that we've made over the last few years are working. I know that there will be some tweaks to those bills this year. And it just depending on ongoing conversations about what exactly that looks like.
Yeah, a lot of it from our point of view, it also appeared to be retention and attracting these public defenders. I feel like, I know we have to fix the system as it is now, but I feel like that's a major issue.
Absolutely. And I, again, from Lane County, not from Portland, sorry. And in Lane County, we don't have a public defender crisis. Our public defense system is run through a nonprofit organization, and they are doing amazing work, and they are retaining their attorneys. They don't have a high level of turnover. They've done a great job creating a culture that attracts attorneys into their organization and trains them up and has a good culture and is a great place to work. And so I think, one of the benefits of having a more county oriented approach is that, I hope the rest of the state can look to Lane County and see what we're doing well and try and learn.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. And when we return, more on the upcoming legislative session with Oregon House Speaker Julie Fahey.
Do you plan your vacations based on whether you can speak the local language? With Bavel, language no longer has to be the barrier. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I went to Mexico City a couple of years ago with my girlfriend, who's a native Spanish speaker. So I just let her do all the talking, like all of it. I adored the city, and now I'm going to go back in a couple of months, but with my college roommates, who are a bunch of middle-aged men, none of us Spanish speakers. When I was younger, I might not have been bold enough to do that, but now I'm not anxious because Bavel has me covered. Thanks to Bavel, I know how to order a taxi, how to give directions, how to order in a restaurant, all the small and useful bits of language that make international travel easier. Bavel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in a new language, Bavel is designed using practical, real-world conversations, especially the sort you need while traveling. Food, how to get places. Bavel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. So I hope I'll see you in Mexico in a couple of months. Or, as we say, espero verte en Mexico en un par de meses. So let's get more of you talking in a new language. Bavel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at bavel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at bavel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Bavel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
There's also been a lot of talk about a major transportation bill. Now, the last time Oregon passed one was in 2017 when you were first voted in as a rep. You were part of that session, I think, that passed a $5.3 billion package. But some of those projects from 2017 are still not done. Like I think it's the Abernathy Bridge seismic retrofit or the expansion of I-5. Everything seems to be kind of just halted. And last year, ODOT said it was going to need an additional $1.8 billion a year just to maintain their current services. And there's also, on top of that, even more projects that people are bringing up. I'm curious, what's the end goal here? What are you hoping to fund? This has been going on for almost 2 decades that we're just backed up on larger projects. So I'm just curious, if you guys are going to take all of that into consideration when creating this new one.
So I guess first a little background for folks who may not be following the day-to-day of, what a transportation package is and what we're talking about here. The end goal is for a transportation system that is safe, efficient, and reliable. That is the end goal. It is less about projects this time around. And it is more about making sure that we're modernizing the way that we fund our transportation system. And so in the legislature, we pass a transportation package every, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And the 3 components of a transportation package are where's the revenue coming from, the funding coming from, what are we going to spend that funding on, and what are the accountability mechanisms in place. And so we're going to talk about all 3 of those things this session and hopefully pull them together into a final package. And the reason we're taking this on this session is because, Oregon was the first state in the country to institute a gas tax over a century ago. And that worked great to fund our roads and bridges and infrastructure, in the 20th century. It's working less well now because More people are driving fuel-efficient vehicles. More people are driving electric vehicles. Those are great developments, which we're really excited about. But it means that the revenue from the gas tax isn't keeping up with the needs of our infrastructure system, our transportation infrastructure, even just the basic operations, maintenance, and safety. Are the roads being plowed? Are the potholes being filled? Or do we have appropriate bicycle infrastructure? We're not the only state in the country that is facing this. Every state is facing this dynamic about gas tax versus the transportation needs. So we're hoping to get on the road to modernizing our funding system and making sure that the state has what we need to do the operations and maintenance of our system.
So if gas tax revenue goes down, though, does that mean we just do less in major projects going forward? Like the bridge and the tolls, that kind of thing, or is that when tolls come in? I mean, is that something you're still thinking about?
Yeah, for me, this package is about kind of a back to basics. We need to make sure that we have what we need to maintain what we currently have.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge that we're facing with the declining, the gas tax revenue not keeping up with the need. And so we're not necessarily open to huge new projects in this package. We do need to complete the projects that are already underway, that we've already provided funding for or have gotten major federal funding. So the Rose Quarter and Abernathy Bridge, I would put those in that category. The I-5 bridge is sort of a separate conversation because it's between Oregon and Washington and the feds. So that has sort of a separate funding stream. But for the most part, it's about solving the need in the short term, but also I want folks to be thinking about, okay, in 20 or 30 years, if every car on the road is an electric vehicle, how should we pay for our transportation system? We're not going to get there overnight, right? But we're trying to think about that long-term future and how can we get from here to there?
Yeah. Okay, so this issue hasn't been at the top of a lot of must-tackle lists, but it's certainly on everyone's mind right now on what we've seen in Los Angeles in the past few weeks. So just briefly, is the legislature planning to do anything to address wildfire prevention this year? I know it was brought up as one of Governor Kotek's side quests for y'all, but I'm curious, what is being spoken about as possible bills?
Yeah, it's a really critical issue, especially in the context of what we're seeing in Los Angeles, which is awful. And in the context of Oregon's 2024 wildfire season, we had the most expensive wildfire season on record in 2024, 1.9 million acres burned, hundreds of millions of dollars in wildfire response. And we in the legislature had to convene a special session last month just to pay our bills, to pay the contractors and the folks who did that work on wildfire response last year. I think we need to adapt to the fact that this could be our new normal. And the way that we have funded wildfire response in the past isn't going to keep up with it. Mm-hmm. Right now, when we allocated the funding to pay our bills for fighting those wildfires, that money came from the general fund. So money that's paid into by all taxpayers. Because, the individual pots of money that landowners pay or forest owners pay isn't nearly sufficient to be able to fight fires at that kind of level. Of course, we hope to not repeat last year's season moving forward, but we have to be prepared for that reality. So on to what we're going to do about it. There's been a group that has been meeting over the last year to try and hash that out. How should we change? Who's responsible for what? How should we pay for it? What is a shared responsibility versus of the individual landowners? Those are pretty complicated issues. But there's going to be a proposal this session to change how we fund wildfires.
Cool. Seems like a good thing to focus on.
Yeah.
So I also wondered, how has Trump's election influenced which issues are top priorities for y'all right now? Are there safeguards that the state legislature is looking to pass this year? Is that something that you guys are considering? I'm assuming so, but because we have so many problems of our own to solve that, now thinking about Trump just feels like, oh my God, now what? So I'm wondering how you guys are dealing with that.
Yeah, I became a legislator in 2017. So I was sworn in the same month that President Trump was in his first term. So my first 4 years in office were in that first Trump administration. And so we, in that first administration in the legislature, we needed to take some steps to protect our basic rights and freedoms here in Oregon. We codified Roe v. Wade in 2017 to protect access to abortion if, Roe v. Wade was overturned. We took action. There were some federal rollbacks of environmental protection. And in Oregon, we said, no thanks. We'd like to keep those clean drinking water and clean air and clean water regulations in place. And there were a handful of other things that we did as well. Those protections are still in place now. So we are ready to step up and to defend Oregonians' basic freedoms and constitutional rights when we need to. But you're right, we have a big agenda of challenges in this state that we are trying to solve for as well. And so I just really believe we can't get distracted. We can't get pulled off course. We need to be ready to respond if and when needed. And we're putting, response systems in place here in the legislature, but we've got a big agenda that we need to focus on as well. So, we're going to stand up for people when we need to. We're going to respond when we need to. And we're also going to keep focus on the big challenges our state is facing.
Well, starting the session, the Democrats are going to have a supermajority, which means that you're going to be able to easily pass or raise taxes without any pushback from Republicans. So this next question is more of a statement. Please, for the love of God, no more taxes. Just consider that. Just take that back.
I appreciate
take that back.
Earlier I talked about how cost of living is top of mind for Oregonians right now, and that is also top of mind for us. So I understand fully that while we keep working on housing costs and healthcare costs and utilities and childcare, if we are talking about any new revenue at the state level, that has real implications for families in Oregon. So we know we need to have discussions about how to fund our transportation system and our wildfire response, as we talked about. And those could, in theory, be revenue-raising votes, but they're going to be done thoughtfully. And the work to develop those proposals is being done in a bipartisan way. So I would just point out that, we did not have a supermajority for the last 2 years, but for the 2 years before that, we did. And we only took one revenue vote in that in the 2021 session, even with a supermajority. And it was to this is so esoteric, but it was to raise the aviation fuel tax, which is a tax that helps fund airports and operations.
That's fine. Tax them away. Yeah. I'm talking about us plebeians here. But in all seriousness, are you planning to do anything to take advantage of the supermajority? Like, is there an opportunity for your party, to push forward like a big, bold idea? Or is that not even a thing that you're concerned about?
I really don't think that our priorities change at all based on the size of our majority in the legislature. We've spent we came out of the campaign season in November. And so our members and myself spent months talking to voters at their doorsteps about what they want us to work on. And none of that changes at all around cost of living, good schools, a reliable transportation system. None of that changes whether we have 36 members in the Oregon House or 35 or, 31 Democrats. And so, what our priorities are and the way we do that work isn't going to change.
That's nice to hear. Well, now here's our final and possibly most important question. Did you get your own gavel?
I did, in fact. And just last week, we were all sworn in on Monday. So that was kind of the swearing in ceremony day. And I got an email from my staff saying, you get your choice of 3 different gavels. And they sent me a picture of them. So I did have to choose which gavel I wanted, which was sort of a silly thing to have to decide. But
do you get to personalize it? Like, do we have cursive initials on it? Picture of your dog? Like what?
It's not, as far as I know, not personalized. But I think when you're done being speaker, you get to take it. We'll see.
You get to keep your gavel. Oh my God, I love that. Well, Representative Fahey, I appreciate your time. I know you're going to have so little of it coming up soon, but if you ever want to stop by and just, vent.
Maybe we should talk at the end of session when we figured out what we actually did at the end of these 6 months.
When you're just like, you come back and apologize about the podcast host tax, and I'm going to be so upset. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, and good luck with everything.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, rate or leave us a review. It really does help us out. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.